be a good fit. But industry-wise, I mean, we have folks across industries, and that's really where we see this beautiful cross-pollination of ideas, right? You have someone who's sharing what's working in their industry, and someone in a totally different industry is able to see a way to use that in their own industry and ask the questions, right? So one of the examples I love to share is you have like a traditional attorney barrister operating a brick and mortar, a legal shop, and you have an e-commerce company who's sharing about what they're doing to grow their business. And so you have the e-commerce company who they send an email out and money comes in the door. Every time they email, more money comes in. And the attorney is looking at the e-commerce person saying, well, how are you doing that? And the e-commerce person shares the resources and vendors. And then the attorney is sharing how they use direct mail in their business. And you have the e-commerce company looking and saying, wait, people still send things out in the post and make money every time they send things out? Well, what vendors are you using? Do you use a postcard or do you use a letter? Do you use lumpy mail? What is the strategy you use successfully? And so you get these industries sharing ideas across those lines. Whereas if you went to your industry trade group or your trade show for your industry, everyone's doing the same thing in the same ways. Really, where you get to be a disruptor and do things differently is when you hear those ideas across industries. And that's exactly what happens, in the boardroom at a mastermind meeting.
Yes, I'm a big believer in these types of groups. And do you have any people that you can mention as being part of it, or is it a bit confidential?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about being a member of the group is the membership is confidential, right? So what you share behind those closed doors, those conversations are confidential because that lets you really be vulnerable and talk about the real numbers of what's happening, financially in the company. It lets you talk about your real wins and your real challenges. It lets you talk about, a pending legal issue or financial challenge or whatever else is going on that you might not talk about with others. You can really open up behind closed doors and share. This lets you talk about the marketing strategy. That's like this super ninja strategy. No one else, if only your competitors knew, they eat your lunch, but what's going on, you can share that because you're in a safe space to do that. And if we had that more open where we'd be able to talk about those specifics more openly, then folks wouldn't be as open to sharing what's really going on in the business. So that's
and they do share what's going on. Is that most people open up the books and show you, or some do, or do you make everyone show that?
I mean, look, it's not a requirement, but we all get better growth from that. So an example of this kind of opportunity is someone sharing about what's going on with their marketing and their business, and they're sharing what's happening with their ad spend, right? So they're sharing real world expenses, and on a screen share, they might pull up, their Google AdWords or their Facebook ads and go through the campaigns. And we're looking at the real numbers of what's happening. And we then get to ask the deep dive funnel questions of, well, hang on, like we can see your cost per click, but like, let's talk about the cost per acquisition and customer lifetime value. Well, how many sales are you getting per month, right? So we really get into it, because that's where you find sometimes folks have those blinders on, right? So for example, you'll have a business owner who's sharing that, they'll spend $300 to acquire a new customer, right? And somebody else looks across the table and says like, that's ridiculous. Why would you ever spend that much money to find a new customer? Your product is only $100, right? That makes no sense. And I would never do that. But then you get into it and that person can share that they know their customer lifetime value is, say, $1,200. So they're happy to give away that $3 to get that $12 back out. And that can be an eye-opening moment for somebody else who's not looking at total customer lifetime value, but is looking at the single transaction. And they might not know how loss leaders can work, or how to even calculate customer lifetime value.